I was in Chicago about a month ago, and I've noticed this even in my hometown of Grand Rapids that a lot of newer parking ramps are like part of a building. It's like the first several floors of the building, and then the building is on top of that kind of thing. In those cases, does that mean that the development owns the parking ramp? Like you couldn't buy just that part of the building, right?
It depends on how the deed was formed. But I've seen both. I've seen where it's all in one, and then I've seen where literally the garage itself is its own asset. I mean, its own deed to the building. And so a lot of times there's some congruency there to where if someone were to buy the garage, like they have to allocate a certain number of spaces to the office and this, that, and the other, because obviously the office wouldn't be able to house their employees if they didn't have dedicated parking spaces. But no, it's both. It's both. And so I don't know if we would have an interest in something like that. And the main reason being is that like you don't have as much control over your destiny. And so again, I like to revert back to this parking garage we bought in Clearwater Beach. It's 12,000 square feet of retail on the first floor, and then there's 7 stories of parking. But we own the entire footprint. It's literally, I think it's like an acre and a half of prime real estate. We own an entire footprint, the entire thing. So in 10, 15, 20 years, if there was a much higher and better use for that parcel of land than that for a parking deck, then we would be in full control over actually what happened with the garage and the land. Whereas, if you didn't own the actual structure above, now you're kind of in a precarious situation. So that's kind of how we feel about it. We like to be in control of the destiny.
So you own the retail space as well, like literally the entire thing.
That's correct.
Okay, gotcha.
And we're not retail guys, but the retail was pretty easy to. I mean, it was such a small allocation of the overall deal, and it's all triple net leases. I mean, really high quality tenants. So it was kind of it was an easy decision to make based on the location and the quality of the tenants, and again, just the knowing that allowed us to own the entire asset from top to bottom.
Do you have any idea what the cost is to build a new parking ramp versus buying an existing one, like a cost per square foot or per parking space or anything like that?
That's a great question. They normally base on a price per parking space or parking stall is what they call it. And obviously, what it might cost to build in a cold environment like, St. Paul or Minneapolis, where, you've got a lot of expansion and contraction due to the variations in temperature. You got salt that's going to be coming off cars. Like, it's going to be a much different construction there and probably more costly construction than that of a, call it a dry environment like Phoenix, Arizona, right? Where no moisture, hardly any moisture at all. Not as much deterioration with rebar and concrete and things of that nature. But I don't know the answer to your question. I've seen a range. Obviously, there's lots of variables as well with construction costs nowadays and cost of material, but I've seen a range anywhere from like the mid 20s to the mid to high 40s, 40,000, a space. So I think it's all dependent. There's a wide swing there.
Yeah, I used to, in my old job, there was somebody on the board of our company who worked for the city of Grand Rapids, and he said that he had dealt with some parking ramps in the past, and this was like 15 years ago. He was saying that it was like $25,000 per space to do these things. I'm sure it's way more than that now, but he was saying that they would have to get like 50-year mortgages on these things to amortize them and make the cash flow work.
Wow.
And I didn't even know that was a thing. But anyway, maybe it's a different thing depending on what type of structure and how complex it is or something. But it sounded very expensive.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's definitely not cheap. It's definitely not cheap.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So how could a deal like this go sideways? Like I'm trying to think of how could you make a mistake, maybe buy a property or maybe even make the right decision, but then something bad happens that ruins it. Like either competing parking ramp is built. Doesn't sound like that's a terribly common thing. Or maybe like the local economy tanks and people move away and all of a sudden people don't need to park there anymore. Like, are those kind of the two main things that would impact it, or anything else that could get you?
No, it's a really good question. You hit on a couple that could be a big risk. Like, if you're purchasing a parking lot, I'll give you a perfect example of a lot we did not buy. It was in St. Louis, and it was literally adjacent to the Children's Museum, which is a major attraction in downtown St. Louis, like a major attraction, probably one of the most popular tourist destinations in all of downtown St. Louis. But 88% of the parking demand for this lot was a direct result of the Children's Museum, and so the only 12% made up the transient amount, which one was from like a boutique hotel right around the corner, and the other I forget. Just there's like a small little shopping district there, but the majority of it from that Children's Museum. Well, the Children's Museum's been around for quite some time. It was just purchased by a new group like a year and a half ago. A big group, actually. I think it's the group that owns Busch Gardens. I forget the name of their holding company. But anyway, so like it's got a lot of money behind it, but that doesn't mean that it can't fail. That doesn't mean that there's not risk associated with it potentially failing. And so, with that being said, that was one of the big red flags for us, is that like literally all your eggs are literally in that one basket. If something happens with that Children's Museum, which again, don't foresee that happening, but during hard economic times, are people going to go pay, whatever it is, $30 entry fee for each kid to go to this Children's Museum? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, right? How bad times get, what people are going to decide against doing with their kids as far as recreation. So that was a big one. Big red flag on that deal that scared us enough to, move us away from that deal. But another piece of it was in that part of downtown St. Louis, we just went through one of the biggest economic booms that we've seen for decades. And there wasn't a lot of cranes in the air. Like it's a part of town where like there's a lot of redevelopment happening on like old buildings. Like people are turning these old old industrial buildings into like lofts or things like that. I mean, there's that going on, but I wouldn't say that it's a booming part of St. Louis in general. It's just it's a good linear market, but it's not a booming economy. Like there's not multiple, multifamily high rises being built downtown, and it's not that type of city. And so if something were to happen with parking, what is plan B? And if plan B, if it doesn't look like there's a lot of economic development happening in downtown, then what the hell are we going to do with the surface lot then? Like it's at that point in time, it becomes not a worthless piece of asphalt, but definitely not probably anywhere near what we had paid for, right? And so that's a huge risk to us. There's got to be multiple demand drivers. Like, for example, if it's only courthouses don't move that often, but I would want more than just just the courthouse being the demand driver. I want to know that, okay, the courthouse is here. And so, but also there's, within 2 blocks, there's a stadium of some sort or a music venue, or there's a number of other factors that are going to, in the event COVID happens and they shut down the courthouse, or now they go to virtual trials or whatever. And, but the ball game's still going to happen because it's outside, right? Like what will offset, the lack of demand from the courthouse in that temporary moment and help make it up on the other side? And so you want to know that there's multiple demand drivers there.
That's really interesting. I appreciate you sharing all this. This is just like light bulbs going off. It's making total sense.